Hello, hello, hello.
Clean that off for you.
What's up, Micah? You're the only one here right now. If you guys can hear me, say something. The amount of times I've done a live stream and no one can hear me is more than I'd like to admit. So, yeah, give me a heart or leave a comment or something. Oh, yeah, comments are only for members. That makes sense why no one's commenting. All right, so I'll give you guys a brief background on what we're doing and what the game plan is here. So it's kind of a dual purpose live stream. The idea is to talk with you guys about your builds. Maybe you have some common questions about something like a turbo setup, a chassis setup. Maybe you're looking to swap seats and you want to know my opinion on different stuff. For Black Friday at Drift HQ, we do a lot of sales inquiries where people will send us an email because we try to get people the best pricing we possibly can. Now, with that, a large amount of our messages are common questions. Maybe it's, I want to make 400 horsepower on an SR20, or I have an E36, what coilovers can I buy? So rather than having our amazing sales team send thousands and thousands of messages, I'm doing this live stream in a way to hopefully be able to answer common questions, cut down on some of the emails on our end, but also create a cool space to be able to talk with you guys, hang out and nerd out over car stuff. If you go to the description of this YouTube video, there is a thread that has basically a form where you can submit information. So if you want to know specific things, rather than asking in the live stream chat, use that form because that's the form that I'm going to be referencing throughout this video. Now, if anyone's just joining us, I'll explain all that again, but I'm going to dig right into it. So the first question we've got is, we didn't put names on the form, so I apologize. I'm just going to use people's emails names and maybe it'll be a little bit funny. Our first question is from Kangas, and he's got an E36 325i, and I feel like I'm pretty well equipped to answer questions on E36s because I've kind of turned into the E36 guy. It is a street drift car that's going to have a 2JZ and a ZF. And his question is, what's a good way to start out at the track and feel out a car for setup? Do you take all the toe, camber, caster, normal pressure, or do you start from there? He wants to go to a track with no knowledge of what to do in the scenario. So you got an E36 and you go to Evergreen Speedway, but you've never drifted it. Super, super generic question. We're not really talking about parts here, right? We're talking about setup. The best advice that I would have for you guys would be to start honestly with too much grip, not enough. So to beginner drifters, I always recommend these two things. One, start with new tires and make sure you know what your tire pressure is. You'd be surprised at how many people go to the track and don't ever even check their tire pressure. And two, get a proper alignment before you go to the track. The go-to with 90% of drift cars is a little bit of toe out in the front and a little bit of toe in the rear. My go-to is eighth out in the front, eighth in the rear. Now that changes based on if you have angle kits and all this other stuff. But if you go and you try to drift a car that has toe in on the front, which is the wheels pointing inward, you're probably going to have a bad time and it's going to like have self-steer issues. So my biggest advice would be to get in alignment and just monitor your tire pressure. I like to start with less grip in the front and more grip in the rear to kind of drive around the rear, but it's all preference, and everybody learns in a different way. All right, we got a more technical question now on this next one. Ironically, I believe this is another E36. You guys can let me know in the chat. It's a 1998 328i. I'm 99% sure that's still an E36. He's going turbo this winter. Link ECU, good ECU. S52 cams, M50 intake, ARP head studs, full drift car. I signed your dash already. I like that. All right, so yes, I haven't dabbled much in turbo M50 motors, but what would I recommend to make a reliable 400 horsepower engine? Also, what Black Friday deals can I take advantage of? I'm probably more passionate about talking about turbo setups than anything else, just because I'm going to go on a limb and say this, and maybe I'm speaking on my ass here, but I don't think there's anyone else that has tried as many different Garrett turbos on as many different engines as I have. And I've tried like multiple different turbos from multiple different lineups on different fuels. So I feel pretty well equipped to say this. For 400 horsepower on an M50, the biggest question, which I wish you answered, was what fuel you're using, because that's a huge determining factor. With turbos, the easiest way to understand this is Garrett rates their turbos at flywheel horsepower. So if you have a G25 550, let's say, that would be way too small for your M50, but I'm just using it as an example. That second number is the flywheel horsepower that they rated at. Take 15% off that. So that turbo will be at its optimum before it starts getting mad around 500, 480 horsepower. Now that would be if you're on ethanol. If you're on pump gas, you're only going to want to run like maybe half of that boost. So my rule of thumb is take 15% off that second number for your ethanol number. And then for pump gas, usually, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. Usually it's another 100 to 200 horsepower less. So if we're talking about an M50, which is a bigger engine, it's a six-cylinder. Six cylinders, I don't like to go any smaller than like a G30. G35 is probably ideal, but you can get away with a G30. G35 900 is my favorite turbo for almost any setup. That turbo will do probably 500, maybe like 450, 500 on pump gas. It'll do 750 on ethanol. That's all good? Yeah. Okay. I'll post it. Sorry. But anyway, so I would probably recommend for that setup, if you're on ethanol, I would say do like a G30 660 and it will be very responsive. You'll have a little bit of headroom, but if you're on pump gas, I would probably recommend a G35 900 or maybe even a 1050. Your AR, a good rule of thumb is for most of the engines that we'll be talking about on here, use the smaller one if you're on pump gas, and usually the middle or bigger one if you're on ethanol, because the exhaust gas, you need more. Sorry, I keep moving this table. I know it's shaking you guys a lot. All right, so next question. And for those of you guys joining me, I'm going to give a super quick brief on what we're doing right now, just to remind you. There's a Google form that is in the description of this YouTube video. It has a sheet where you can fill out a bunch of information. Rather than leaving a comment on here, this makes it way easier for me than having to sift through a bunch of comments. It gives me all the information to be able to give you guys the best advice possible. Quick, selfish, shameless plug at Drift HQ. We do this thing where you email us, blackfriday@drifthq.com. Whatever parts you need, we're going to make sure you get the best deal. Even if we can't tell you right away, we'll send you a quote and let you know that we can get you the best deal in a couple of days. Regardless, what we're doing is we're just going through as many different comment setups and questions as I can. That way, we're not answering the same question a million times. So I know I see a lot of E36s in here, a lot of S chassis, JZ questions. So I'm just going to answer as much as I can and hopefully give you guys some good feedback. So that way, you know, whether you're buying from us or someone else, what parts you want to use. So that way you buy the right thing the first time. All right, so we have a 1993 Nissan 240SX. That's the S13. If he were to buy said car in question, so he doesn't own it yet, what are the best engine mods for it after he puts BC racing coilovers, an aftermarket radiator, FDF angle kit on it? He wants to get into drifting soon, but the tracks near him have very long turns and a stock KA might not be able to hang. I'm not well equipped to give you advice on a stock KA and turboing it. People do it. The best thing that I would say is that KAs are great motors, but they have a bad reputation because they were so cheap for so long that people would just put really cheap components on them. They wouldn't take their time with making sure that it was mechanically sound, and then they would blow it up maybe from a ECU with a flash tune from their buddy versus like properly dyno tuning it and taking care of it. I'm pretty sure with those, you'd probably want to do head studs and a head gasket, but let's pretend you don't even have the budget to do a turbo kit on it. You can absolutely have fun with a stock KA. I've driven stock KA S13s, and yeah, you got to really work it, but it's just a matter of getting your tire pressure good. On a car like that, I'd say the biggest thing is really, again, just making sure your alignment's good, because that'll be everything. You don't need angle with a stock KA. On an S13, one of the best things you can do is just get those little rack spacers. They're like super tiny. Some tie rods have them built in, and that will give you just a little bit of extra angle to save yourself if you're on the verge of spinning out. But just put a decent set of front tires, matching rear tires, probably run the front tires at, I don't know, depending on your preference, 30 to 50 pounds, and run the rear 30 to 50 pounds, and just have fun. Don't worry about trying to upgrade power and go down that road. You can absolutely have a blast with a KA without needing to buy a bunch of stuff. All right. So the next question is not about the parts, but this car that is in question is an E36 that has an SLR angle kit, reinforced subframes, full cage, Fitment Lab overs, precision turbo, turbo M52. This is a real deal. The question is, should he sell his E36? I'm assuming, okay, it's Mark, so yeah, it's a dude. Should he sell his E36 for JZX110? You know, the problem is I don't have enough info. I don't know what your purpose is, right? If it's a drift car, the E36 arguably I think is the best competition drift car ever, and they look cool. JZX110s are like, it's an acquired taste. I think that they're kind of ugly, but they're like cool ugly. I've not personally drifted one, but a 1J is a very reliable motor. It will feel lazy compared to your turbo N52 for sure. But it will be a much better daily. It will be way more reliable than your E36. Even if your E36 is super reliable, 1Js are just like, you can throw them off a bridge, light them on fire, sit them on red line with no coolant in them, and they'll still run. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I tried. I'm gonna take a sip of my tea. Don't mind me. Let's see how many. Oh yeah, we got a lot of stuff to go through. As a reminder, guys, read the description if you want to know what's going on. We got a form. I'm just trying to nerd out as much as I can on car setup stuff with you guys. And next up, we have Sideways King 13 with a Lexus IS300 stock drivetrain 5-speed manual, the LSD. Suggestions for a semi-budget NAT build with supporting mods. Not looking for huge power, something streetable and fun with all the great 2J sounds. NA 2Js are slept on. I think they're great. The best thing that I could suggest for you on any NAT build, what you're going to be fighting is the higher compression from it being an NA engine. Now, let's just say you want to leave the engine stock. You don't want to do head studs. You don't want to do any of that. The higher up you put the power, so like the lazier the turbo or the later that it comes on, the less risk of detonation if you wanted to run pump gas. But I would heavily suggest, before anything, do ethanol. When you have higher compression, ethanol is so much more forgiving. You'll make more power. The turbo will spool faster, and it will just live much longer. So my best supporting mod for you, and my suggestion would obviously be a really good ECU with a good knock sensor, a good tuner, and good fuel. All of the other stuff, the turbo that you use, the injectors that you use, obviously, you know, I'm a Garrett, I'm a D-Strokes boy, but the most important thing in your scenario is going to be using good fuel, a good ECU, and a good tune. All right, next up, we've got a car that, have I owned one of these? Is a LS400 is the same as a Celsior, right? I think so. I'm pretty sure it's the same. So, I've had one of these. All right, confirmed. LP Fanbro drives the 1994 Lexus LS400 stock 290 horsepower at the flywheel 1UZ with a manual conversion in the future. Ideal mods to make it a viable seat time street car. I have not drifted a 1UZ. I know that they work. You've drifted one?
Yeah, with nitrous.
With nitrous. You have to put nitrous on it.
Especially in that car because it's so heavy. Yeah.
I mean, look, you could do nitrous or you could do some weight reduction, but if it's going to be a daily, you probably don't want to make it too race car. I know that anything V8 wise will get hot. Is that fair? Does it overheat?
Yeah, big rod.
Good radiator, good fans. When we're talking cooling on cars, I think the most slept on thing is fans. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret that no one ever talks about. There's CFM, okay? And that's what most people will compare aftermarket e-fans with. And I think it's bullshit. I think it's a lie. I don't think it tells even a small part of the story, because I think I could be completely talking out of my ass on this, but I have a point that I'm going to get to. I think the way that CFM is measured is on a fan with no load, so it has no radiator behind it. I've had a super high CFM fan, like 2,000 CFM, that overheated a car faster than a 1,000 CFM fan, and I found the only determining factor of a fan that's going to work well is a high amp draw. Now, obviously, we're not talking brushless fans because that's a whole nother scenario, but when you look and see how many amps that fan is pulling, that tells you how much work that motor is doing. Because I think what happens is if you have a thick radiator, which a lot of us will have on a drift car or on something aftermarket, you put a high CFM fan with a tiny little motor because you have to get a slim fan to fit that big radiator. And now you have a giant radiator and a tiny little fan that can't pull through, where you'd actually be better off having a thinner radiator and then a fan with a giant motor on the back that can really do the work. Because for drifting, 90% of your cooling is done when you're sitting in grid or when you're sideways. So you can't rely on the airflow like you would on a street car. I know that I'm kind of going on a tangent. We're not talking about the 1UZ in particular, but this is like the best generic advice that I can give. We recommend Spall fans. That's what I use on pretty much anything that I run. Nishimoto has a really great race fan. I used to use that on everything. The problem is they're just very big. If you can fit them, I think that is your best bang for your buck, but it's really important when you're doing these bigger fans, you pay attention to the amp rating, because 90% of the time you're going to need to possibly put in some really big relays and fuses. Super important. I've definitely almost caught cars on fires by not running the proper length or thickness wire. So you want to make sure you get all your wiring stuff dialed. And there's a lot of really good like fan wiring kits that you can actually find online for that purpose. It typically will cost me more money to go to an auto parts store and piece together all the relays and wire and inline fuses that I need, then splice it all together versus just buying one of those fan kits and shortening the wires. So definitely a big piece of advice there. But the 1UZ, put a good diff in it, some good coilovers. Don't be afraid to run some loose tires if that's what you need to get sideways. But it's really, just whatever direction you want to go with it, I guess. So as a reminder, I'm not going to say this too much, but I see a lot of people joining us. Read the description. I'm going off a form that I got with a bunch of questions that have been submitted for you guys, hoping to answer some common questions. That way you guys know what to buy when it comes Black Friday time, because nothing's worse than getting the wrong size turbo and blowing your engine up or not making the power that you told Instagram you were going to make. All right. Gerald Kelly has a 96 Toyota Mark II. As of right now, the car is completely stock engine-wise and auto. Subframes are reinforced. What he's doing right now is refreshing the engine. Ooh, new gaskets, ARP head studs, fluid damper, 272 cams with the valve springs, HKS, exhaust, Odyssey fab downpipe. I know I should manual swap. I'm thinking of T56 or the R154. My question is, which ECU should I go for? Is it worth going Haltech or just get a plug-and-play link? What would you recommend me doing? It's going to be a street car with a little bit more attitude. I obviously don't know the turbo setup that you're going with, but is a 96... Can you confirm if that's a JZX90 or JZX100? I think that that's a JZX90, in which case I like your cam choice. But if it was a JZX100, I always recommend going smaller cams. The problems are JZX100s, the VVTi 1Js, have super tiny ports. So when you put a big cam in it, it like makes the engine unhappy because you're trying to consume a lot of air, but it can't actually take the air in. So you actually just make it worse everywhere. Do we confirm, is that a 100 or is that a 90?
Yeah, 96 Toyota Chaser, JZX100. Yeah, 1JZ GTE.
Damn, they had JZX 100s in 96?
That's what this is saying.
Huh. All right. Someone's, yeah, that is 100. Okay. Well, yeah, I would recommend going. I honestly run stock cams in a lot of my VVTi stuff, or 264s. 272s are a little bit big, but you'll get that chop if that's what you want. I would highly recommend going R154 just because I think it's a great transmission. The T56 obviously works too, and it's good. But if you want to save some money and keep things simpler, I run my my Chaser street car at 750 horsepower. Beat the absolute crap out of it with a stock R154. The newer ones have better sinkers than the old ones. I think the shifting is fine. Some people think it's sloppy. I've also beat the crap out of my drift car here that had I think, yeah, that was a new R154. I think it's the best, and then you don't need to worry about adapters. The clutch just works. Everything bolts up. You can use factory drive shaft. It's great. I hate trans swap adapters if you can avoid them, and the R154 is great. So if you have a car that is meant for it, go R154. Is it worth getting a Haltech or go plug and play Link? I'm a Link boy. You guys know that. But the best advice I can give you, find who's going to tune your car. Hopefully it's someone that's good, competent. It's way too common that people spend all this money on their car and then they bring their car to let's just say a C tier tuner because they want to save money on the tune, and then they get a really poor end result. You spend all this money on the best engine components, but your tuner doesn't even know how to take advantage of them. Now, ECU wise, I would say talk to your tuner, whatever they're most comfortable with. I don't want to, I'll say this. I don't think it'll be looked in a bad way. If all they tune is Haltech, I would maybe find another tuner. Haltech, no, I don't. I'm fighting with fire here. Yeah, I don't know if I want to go on the short. Basically, there's a lot of tuners. All they tune is Haltech, and typically they don't know a lot, and they rely heavily on a lot of the closed loop stuff that Haltech does. And there's no problem with it, but a lot of times when you have a car that's running closed loop, then when you have a sensor fail, you jeopardize your engine because it's so heavily reliant on your sensors. Now, again, I recommend you go with whatever your tuner's comfortable with. No problem with Haltech. It's just that that's a common issue that I've seen with a lot of people that have Haltech cars is it's really in the tuner, not in the actual ECU itself. All right, we're going to move on to the next question, which is from Kevin or Kavina, one of the two, with a 2010 Nissan 370Z. your question is next upgrade suspension. That's a mild seat time car for beginners. Should I keep the rear spring perches like Tommy F yeah, or go full coilover? It's a stock car except for FDF mild Mantis and LSD. Great setup. Suspension I think is definitely a good starting point. On pretty much all my Z's, I go to a true coilover. The only advantage I guess you would get out of staying with a stock spring bucket is it's a little bit faster if you wanted to do a spring change. I like going to a true coilover and having a tow arm, because that would be no, that's not the tow arm. That's your camber arm. It allows you to get a little bit more adjustment versus the stock upper arm with a spring perch. To buy an adjustable one is super, super expensive. So it actually saves you money. And it's not like an E36 where people argue and say that the strut towers aren't strong enough for a true coilover. The 350Z is fine, and same with the 370Z. So I would highly, highly recommend the DS series BC coilovers. That is what is kind of my go-to, both on competition cars and street cars. The digressive valving is just really, really nice because it's not harsh. It bleeds off on fast coilover speeds, like if you hit like a quick bump. So it's very similar to other dual valve coilovers, and I think is probably the best value for your money. But anyway, I run those literally on my street cars, and I run them on my competition FD car.
There's members chats in Slack if you want to check those out.
Okay. All right. I'm going to respond to a couple chats real quick before we go back to builds. So, all right, I'm responding to a couple messages that you guys responded in here in the comments, but I'm letting you know this is gonna be the last time I do it. Direct everything through that form. You don't need to pay. You don't need to do anything. There's a form in the description. It just makes it way easier for me because it has all the information, the year of the car, so that way I can give you guys the best advice possible. But a couple of these member chats that I will talk about. Recommendation: I'm making 350, 400 horsepower on a WRX from DJ Bravo. I'll be straight up with you. I don't know a whole lot about WRXs. I don't know what's reliable. You probably have the wrong car if you want reliability, if I'm being honest. My biggest recommendation to you, which is honestly my recommendation to anyone and everyone watching this video, if you want to have a reliable turbo car, put it on ethanol. Put it on ethanol. Put it on ethanol. When you have good fuel, it just removes the possibility of ever blowing up your engine if something goes wrong. If you lose a wastegate line and you overboost, if you get a bad batch of fuel at the gas station, if your tune isn't really good or your car overheats, it's just so forgiving. It will save you so much money and headache in the long run. Even if you don't have a station near you, get a barrel, leave it in your garage. I run Ignite Red just because it's very consistent. I know what I'm getting every single time. But you could go to the Get Pump E, fill up a barrel in the back of your truck, leave it in your garage. Life's too short to run pump gas. Ethanol. Okay, next question. Wolf Jinx, 2019 Ford Mustang EcoBoost, full bolt-ons. Would I ever consider building EcoBoost since I started to get into Stangs? They're sweet. The EcoBoost engine's awesome, especially the Performance Pack one. I don't really have a purpose for one. I think that's my biggest gripe. It's a great car, and I think it fits a lot of needs. As you guys know, I have a lot of different cars, and it just doesn't really fit a place in what I have in terms of car stuff. But again, ethanol, any car, put it on ethanol, put it on ethanol, put it on ethanol. Johnny off the leash, what's up? I got a R32 Skyline GTR. Solid start. What is very solid? What your opinion with these cars? Where would you start? Body, interior, motor, and trans on R32 GTR. I'm just gonna start saying put it on ethanol to everyone. On a stock GTR, usually the best thing that you can do, I don't want to be lame and say maintenance, but there's so much that gets dry rotted and cracks and fails that I would thoroughly inspect all of your vacuum lines, thoroughly inspect your cooling system. The two best tools that anyone should own would be a boost leak tester, which if you don't own one, you can make one. I just go and get like a little piece of PVC pipe from Home Depot. You can put like a bicycle tube valve on it. Boom, now you have a boost leak tester. Put your system up to, I don't know, 15, 20 PSI and see if you hear leaks or see anything anywhere. And then two would be a coolant pressure tester. They're a little bit on the pricier side, but you can rent them for free from any auto parts store. They put a hold on your credit card, you take it home, and then you bring it back. Put a coolant pressure tester on your car, pump it up to like 18, 20 pounds, see if you have any leaks anywhere. The number one killer on old RBs is going to be if you overboost it, you have bad fuel, or if you overheat it. So get your cooling system in order, get your vacuum system in order. Now you've got a reliable car, and then I would just start with whatever the car needs. Like if your interior shot, work on the interior. If you want to spice up the engine, spice up the engine. If all your bushings are blown out, fix them. That would kind of be my advice on that. Seth has a wide body 5.0 Mustang, wants to do an RB26 swap in it. Where would be a good place to start? He wants the PRP street block. I don't think the PRP blocks have released yet. That would be sick to do that swap. A good place to start would be obviously with the engine, figure out what trans you want to run. I don't even know if you could get an adapter for a T56, but that would I would assume that would be the move since that is kind of like the stock trans for Mustang. But yeah, I mean, you got a big build ahead of you. I think I'll be straight up. Like the sad truth that no one ever talks about is that if you want to engine swap any car, minimum 10 grand. Doesn't matter what the car is. And that's like usually even on top of the engine, even if you're doing your own labor, there's just so many things that add up. You got your ECU, you got your wiring harness, you got your fuel system, maybe you have to change your radiator, intercooler. It's so easy to see the price of an engine, get really excited, and then jump headfirst into a project. And the next thing you know, you can't afford to finish it, or it just scope creeps too much, and now you have a car on jack stands for years. So anyone that's looking to engine swap a car, like really, really, really do your research on like all the pieces that are needed, because it would suck to take down like a cool, good running car to start an engine swap when realistically you're not going to be able to have all the parts for a very long time. Now, obviously, maybe you could ball out. If you're looking at a PRP street block, you can just, 100K like that, boom, RB26 in your Mustang. That would be the move if that's what you want to do. And just have like, I don't know, just write me a blank check and I'll build it for you. How's that? No, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a lot of work. That'll probably take us like a couple months. So, but yeah, that'll be sick. I would love to see it. And maybe you could let me do a burnout in or something. All right. I've got 4 more questions that I'm going to respond to that were from the chat. And then I'm going to go back to that form. So again, if you have questions, ask them on the form. Even if I don't get to it on this live stream, I might be able to get to it in the future. Read the description. It'll explain what we're doing. We got a sweet form to just talk about questions and hopefully answer common things you guys want to know more about. All right. Grimlock, should I rebuild his 350Z with a small block or just go ahead and do a full drivetrain swap with an LS? Both cost the same. Oh, no, sorry. Rebuild my 350 small block for my C10 or do a full drivetrain swap with an LS. I'm not a big V8 guy. I have owned an LS, but I don't think it really counts. I don't feel well equipped to answer this question, but I would like to think that going to a fuel injected LS is probably the move. It is ridiculous how cheap you can get like a GM Performance LS for and have a brand new 0-mile motor, and the amount of aftermarket support for it's kind of wild. So if I was in your shoes, that's what I would do versus having a shop rebuild a small block. Like, I don't know, maybe rebuild a small block and sell it. I'm not a good person to ask. Maybe someone in the comments will have better advice than me, but I would lean towards just doing a new LS, since the used ones sell for almost the same dang price as the new GM Performance one. That'd probably be my suggestion. And by the way, I'm not a self-proclaimed expert on anything I say. There's no warranty with any comments that I make. If you disagree with my opinion, you're probably right and I'm probably wrong. I've just tried a lot of stuff and been wrong many times. So I like to think that I'm a little bit closer to being right than a lot of the other people out there, if that makes sense. Carlos Riviera, I got my first drift car, 370Z. Someone teach me how to drift my PPE stuff. PPE. What's PPE?
Like safety stuff.
PPE. Someone save me. Got my. I don't understand the question. You want to drift in New Jersey? You want to learn how to drift? Hit up Chris Knapp. He's got a drift school at Englishtown Raceway Park. The Knapps are the most amazing family ever. They run that track up there. Chris has a drift school. He is literally the most passionate, coolest, most positive person ever. Would highly recommend going out. He's got a drift school. I think they teach in that like skid pad that they are, and it's a great way to improve your driving between all the events they have up there. And a 370Z is a perfect car for there too. Bank Films. We got two more. What do we do for safety when we're drifting cars, making sure a car doesn't drift into a delivery truck or employee? This isn't a build question, but we can answer this. We have a, sorry, I keep kicking the table. I got to stop doing that. We have a system here where we basically have a chat with everyone at the compound. We have a little over 30 people here that work full time. And whenever there's any drifting or anything going on, we cone off all of the entryways to the driftable areas. We send out a message that pings everyone here at the compound. And obviously, if there's a delivery person here, we just don't do anything. So we'll wait for them to leave, post coast is clear, and then we do the driving stuff. All right. Last one from the comment section, and then we're going back to only the forum. So read the description and ask me stuff in the forum. What can I tell you about drifting Miatas? Well, I can't tell you much, but I can tell you they drift. I can tell you that you're going to want either the clutch type diff, which maybe is a Torsen diff. I know it comes in certain Miatas. You're going to want that. You're going to want the 1.8 motor if you don't already own the 1.6 motor. Angle-wise, like you can actually drift and have fun in a stock Miata. Coilovers would be nice. A seat would be nice. But they're honestly really fun cars to learn, and you're just probably going to be stuck in first gear. Yeah. Oh, a rollover bar would be a good idea. But honestly, you're going to be able to roll over in first gear? Probably not, because you drive a Miata. Sorry, that was mean. But yeah, rollover bar, you don't want to die. Okay. Next question. We're going back to the forum. And if you're just joining us, this is what we're doing. I am saving all of our amazing sales staff at Drift HQ the headache of answering the same question a bajillion times by doing this and hopefully answering some common questions about different builds. That way, if you guys want to beat the Black Friday rush, hit us up and get some parts for your car. I can make sure you get the right stuff so you can be happy and do whatever you want to do with your car. All right, next one. We've got the Cody J. BMW E46, drifty boy, planning on Bara swapping his E46. How do I think it would perform? I actually get this question a lot. A lot of people will ask me about the Bara engine. If there's any Australians watching this, feel free to comment and tell me I'm an idiot and that you know more than I do, because it would be true. The engine is very, very tall. So the first thing you're going to want to know is that you probably can't fit it in any car that you want to put it in unless you have it sticking out the hood. I don't think I could fit it in any car that I own other than a Mustang. Maybe an old car you could get it to fit in. It is the most ridiculously tall engine. It is just crazy. Like, it's huge. Okay, you can make good power on the turbo engines or even the NA engines with a couple like key upgrading mods. They have harmonic issues, and that's something that I ran into big time. In drifting, I would imagine that wouldn't be great just because of all the clutch kicks and stuff that we do to the drivetrain. But the biggest thing that I'm not a huge fan of the Bara for a drifting application is just the rev range. It's naturally not a very high revving engine, which isn't a problem. You just need to understand that you're going to be operating at a lower RPM. Let's talk super generally here. Everyone wants to rev as high as possible. For drifting, that's usually a bad thing. Drifting, the number one most important thing is not horsepower, it's torque and having a big window of torque. If you can have like 4,000 RPM to play with, it doesn't matter if it's 2,000 to 6,000 RPM, 4,000 to 8,000 RPM. That's what you want for a good drift car. A lot of times people chase a horsepower number and say like, oh, I got my LS and I want to rev it to 10 grand. But what you do is you absolutely neuter that motor where it makes almost no torque, and then it sucks for drifting because you need the torque to get the tires loose. So focus on torque when you're looking at an engine. And yeah, the Bara does make a lot of torque. So I kind of am contradicting myself with what I'm saying. I just don't think it's going to fit in your E46. Now, someone's probably already done it and can prove me wrong, but it's not going to be easy. And the the BMW engines that are out there, there's so many good options that you could throw a turbo on and like a head gasket and make the same power with like probably a tenth of the cost. And obviously, we have a lot more support for BMW engines over here than Bara's, but maybe you're from Australia and everything I'm saying is relevant. You never know. Chevy S10 with a K-swapped K24, K20 head, and a BMW ZF. What would you need to do to make 600 horsepower reliably? I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's a stock K24. We don't have any specifics here other than it has a K20 head. But the biggest thing that people do wrong, especially now that you can rear-wheel drive swap K-series, they want torque, right? Because that's what we want for a drift car. I just said we want torque for drifting. The stock engines can make a lot of power, and you saw the Honda guys doing it forever, making, I don't know, probably 6, 7, maybe even 800 horsepower in the stock K series. I wouldn't be the one to ask, but they can make big power. The thing is, they're keeping that torque low, mainly for traction reasons, but that's also to keep those motors alive, because you'll break a rod and you will piss off everything in that bottom end if you try to throw a lot of torque on it. So if you want to make 600 horsepower reliably, don't put a turbo that's rated at 600 horsepower. Put a turbo that's rated at like 900 horsepower, something crazy. That way you're not shocking the bottom end with a lot of torque, or run a really, really soft boost ramp, just because that's what'll blow it up. Now, if you have a built engine, ethanol, I mean, even still, ethanol, run ethanol. If you don't want to blow your engine up, ethanol, run ethanol. Okay. Thanks for my TED Talk. Next question. We have Hector with a 323 IS drift car. Could dual caliper lines be more affordable? I've got a solution for you. Ready for it? Our Drift HQ lines are affordable at $163. However, get ready for it. What if I told you you didn't need dual caliper lines? What if I told you you could use just your single calipers and you could get an inline hydro kit that people even run on four-wheel drift cars like myself on the RTR Mustang or on my Driftmaster Z36? You don't need a dual caliper setup. Some people will complain and say that, oh, maybe the brake pedal feels a little funny while they're pulling the other handbrake. The reality is you get used to it probably in your first track day, and then you can forget about it. Like it doesn't affect you negatively in any way, shape, or form. It's less weight. It's less parts to buy. It's less things to go wrong. We sell a reverse compact hydraulic e-brake for $169,999 on drifthq.com. That's 34 entries to an RTR Spec 5 Mustang, just like the drift car that uses a single rear caliper and not a dual caliper. So guess what? The way to afford dual caliper lines is not to use them. All right, next question. 2006 Ford Mustang. It's got an angle kit, hydro. It's FBO, cammed, 3-valve, or whatever 3V means. Probably not 3-valve. Wondering how the rear anti-squat bracket works for the rear control arms where they have 3 different adjustment settings. All right, I'm going to be straight up with you. I don't know anything about your Mustang, but I do know what anti-squat is. And this would be my suggestion with anti-squat. For drifting, when you add anti-squat, you get a lot more forward bite, which is sick. But in doing so, typically it's a trade-off of losing side bite. So what I would suggest, if this is, yeah, it is a drift car, judging by your thing. So if you add the anti-squat, just know that if you're off the throttle, the car is going to feel like it's probably going to want to spin out. So if you want a little bit more side bite back, I'd probably take some of that anti-squat out. A lot of that has to do with just like how the rear end, well, actually, that's a straight axle car. I'm thinking anti-squat on an IRS car. It still applies that when you add more anti-squat, the car is going to have a lot more forward bite. I don't know how that's going to affect your side bite because I'm not very good with a straight axle car in terms of knowledge. But you will also, when you have a lot of anti-squat, what I like about it, and that's why I love my E36s and I set them up with a lot of anti-squat, is when you pull the handbrake, it throws the rear wheel up into the chassis. So you get a lot of grip when you're on the throttle. And then when you're off the throttle, you lose a lot of grip. And what I find with that is it makes a really competitive car because you can follow slow cars, but also be really, really fast at the same time. You just have to be very committed because the more you get on the throttle, the more you're slamming the rear wheels into the ground, which makes you go faster. It took me a really long time to understand what anti-squat is. I still would say my knowledge of how it works and what it does is maybe a 5 out of 10 compared to a lot of these drag racers or even someone like Chelsea. But the easiest way to explain how anti-squat works is you're rotating certain arms in your linkages, whether it's an IRS or a straight axle car. And what you're trying to do is make it so when you are applying traction, you're creating a leverage point so that it naturally pushes the wheel into the ground. A car with low anti-squat might actually do the opposite, might tuck the rear up into the car. And when you do that, think about it, you're losing traction. So if you have a car that's squatting a bunch when you get on throttle, it's probably going to hook a lot worse in a dig or on a drag strip or even a drift car versus one that's pushing that tire into the ground. A great example of this is my Chaser. I noticed when I lowered it a bunch, every time I'd get on the gas, I'd feel it back end squatting. It was just slow, and I'd have to run like really, really grippy tires to keep up with other people. I actually talked to the Minoas, which are like OG Chaser setup gurus. They've competed in them forever. And with those cars, what's interesting is you actually do the opposite of what you do in an S chassis. On an S chassis, when you lower it, there's a traction arm, you lengthen it, and that will give you some anti-squat back. On the Chasers, you actually shorten it. And what that does is that rolls your knuckle in the proper orientation. So when you get on the throttle, you're slamming that rear wheel into the ground more versus doing the opposite. So, all right, next question. We've got a 2001 Nissan S15 Silvia with a built bottom end, SR, Kelford drop-in cams. Sounds like a good setup. What turbo would be good to make high 400s, low 500 wheel horsepower, but not be laggy? Ethanol, I'm going to assume we're talking ethanol because you're an SR guy, and SR guys are usually pretty good on putting their cars in ethanol. You want to make low 500s. You want a G25 660. That's going to be the ticket for you. The G25 550 is my favorite snappy SR turbo. It is happiest around 450. You can make 500 with it, but you're starting to create a lot of heat, so your IATs will start to go up. The 660 will make 500 all day. It'll still be super snappy, super responsive. Neither turbos are laggy. You'll just probably spool maybe 500 to 600 RPM sooner with the 550 versus the 660. The beautiful thing that you can do with this is you can start with, say, the G25 550. And then if you ever want more power, you can buy the 660 and you don't have to change anything on the hot side. The turbos are actually completely interchangeable. With Garrett's whole lineup, if it has the first three letters the same, G25, G30, G35, G40, basically that refers to the hot side of the turbo, the frame. So any G25 turbo, the hot sides are interchangeable. And what that means is you don't need to redo fab work. You can just swap out that super core and you don't need to buy a hot side again. So you could do the G25 550. And then if you ever wanted to go more power and you're okay with sacrificing a little bit of RPM spool wise, you could then go to the G25 660. Now the 550, I would say, makes its meat of the power in the mid-range. I still rev my G25 550 cars to $8,000, but they definitely have a graph that kind of rolls over up top, where the G25 660 will hold a little bit better. If you are looking for better traction as a street car, it'll give you a little bit more of a flat line torque instead of just hitting with a bunch of torque and then rolling off. But again, with these tiny turbos, ethanol is key. If you're on pump gas, as an example, that G25 550 that I would feel confident saying you can make 480 on no problem. On pump gas, I would say keep that at like low 300s. G25 660 will probably get you in the 400s on pump gas, but even then, like, I don't like to run more than like 12 to 14 pounds if it's a pump gas car and I'm going to be beating the crap out of it. The problem is, unless your tune is like really, really good or you have really good knock sensors, once things start getting hot, things start getting mad, maybe you lose a wastegate line, engine goes boom, ethanol. If you learn anything from this, ethanol. And if you need fuel stuff to support ethanol, we can get you supplied. We got Vibrant lines, D-Strict injectors, D-Strict fuel pumps. That's what we run in all our stuff. It's ethanol safe, and you will make your engine live longer, and you will be much happier, and it smells good too. Next question, we have Lion. I'm just going to totally mispronounce. I'm working with emails. We didn't put the chance for you guys to give your names in this form. So this dude's email looks like something like Lion Mane. We got an 89 Chevy Corvette. It's stock, needs new suspension, but his driveway ramp is steep. Should I bag it like Mike and coilovers? Which ones for a reasonable price? BC stopped making a kit for this car. For 89 Corvette? Is that a C4?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think BC makes a kit for that car. But there's also no off-the-shelf bag options because I wanted to bag my C4, and I didn't because it required custom fab work, and we don't know how to do that, of course. That was my reason. That's a good question. It's weird because those front bumpers are so long. I'll tell you my gripe with bagged cars. Now, I don't own one, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. But I don't like bagged cars because usually, now Mike is telling me all about those extreme low bag setup he's got now. I don't know. But traditionally, the bagged cars, they get softer when you bleed the air out, right? So I like to drive my cars low because I like to look cool and not like a dork. So all the bag dudes ride around with their car looking like they're on stilts like this with the wheels all poked out because they need the air pressure to not rub and smash and bake and roll their fenders. I would rather have a static car be a little bit higher but not worry about blowing through my fender when I hit a bump than have a bag car just like an air out in the parking lot but then look like a dork whenever I'm driving around. I guess, it depends, right? Like if you want to look at your car in a parking space and think that it looks cool, bags are probably the option. I'm not talking shit about that. I like looking at my cars in parking spaces. But maybe for you, a good option would be doing a coilover setup and doing an air cup on the top. I haven't done that, but I've driven cars that have it, and it's really cool because you kind of get the best of both worlds. I want to say there's a kit that actually works with BCs, obviously not for your application, but for other people. I want to say Airlift maybe makes it. And that's cool. You can get the best of both worlds. If you have a bagged car and I offended you, I'm sorry. It is what it is. One day I'll bag a car and then I can actually talk shit. All right, we got a 95 Nissan hardbody. The truck is lower with a 4-inch block, perch redrill, and 3-inch lowering leaf springs. Front's got the torsion bars cranked down. The bump stops are removed. The interior is gutted. And it's got bucket seats and a hydro. So we're talking drift car. What would I do to make this old truck party even harder? Never drifted a hardbody. I know they drift. Those would come with a K24, right? Or sorry, KA24.
Yeah,
KA24.
Yeah.
What would I do?
Sexsmith and Robbins both used to drive them. Robbins LS swapped his. Sexsmith drove with the KA. And
I mean, I like SRs, so I'd say put an SR in it. But you can, honestly, a turbo KA is sick. If you can afford to build the KA, even better. But again, if you want to turbo the KA, let's just say you do a really budget turbo setup, but do a really good fuel system. Do ethanol, do maybe a head gasket and head studs, and do just like really good fuel system with ethanol, a good ECU, cheap turbo kit if you want to save money there. And I think that would be great, and you'd have a lot of fun versus swapping and dealing with all that. The torque that the KAs make is sick. If you happen to be in Florida, a lot of people will ask me shops that I recommend they take their cars to work on, and it's really tough because there's not a lot of shops around here that I would recommend you go to. But Lee over at Monster Performance, that dude has built and driven and swapped and worked on some of the baddest KA engines I've ever seen. So whether you want to go from mild to wild, if you got any other stuff, I highly recommend working with Lee. He's a great dude. I don't know what the wait list is like to get into his shop, and I know he's working on a lot of fancy Skyline GTRs, but that dude knows his way around drift cars. And if it's a Nissan engine, he's probably tried everything imaginable with it. So he's definitely someone I would utilize as a resource for KAs, probably even more so than myself. Definitely more so than myself. All right, next one we got a Chevy Corvette 2000. That would be a C6, or is that a C5? I think that's a C5. Okay, this is gonna be a drift car. Haven't done comps or anything yet. Wondering what my advice would be to get your name on the map and progressing up through the chain of pro drifting. Bought all his parts through Drift HQ. Thank you, I appreciate it. And you got great hands for beginner, but he's been doing a lot of sim street skids for some time now. My advice for getting your name on the map: do some local comps. How else? Social media is honestly huge, right? Don't be a takeover kid. If you go and do takeovers or post street drifting clips, I can tell you right now, no brand will want to work with you ever. We don't touch takeover kids or street drifters with a 10-foot pole. It's just a huge liability. Imagine we worked with someone and they put our name on their car and then they went out and got arrested or crashed into a family and it was all over the news. So I would highly recommend staying away from the street skidding, or at least putting it on social media if you so feel compelled to do so. But go to local comps, travel, check out, do some traveling. Your driving is going to speak the most. And honestly, doing sim driving is a huge, huge, huge benefit. It will increase your driving abilities tenfold. Some of the best drivers I've ever driven with, especially the young ones, are like excellent sim drivers. I can't tell you how insane it was when I went to Brazil and lined up against these, like, I don't know, they had to be like, the average age was like somewhere between like, I don't know, maybe like 13 and 18. And these kids were some of the most robotic, and I mean this in like the best way possible, robotically good drivers I've driven with, like make zero mistakes. You can just tell that they practice nonstop on the sim. I was blown away by the talent there. Now, the level of cars was less than we'd see in like a Pro-Am or even like a Pro Spec thing in the US, but the driving ability was incredible. And as I learned more, just a lot of drivers over there really take the sim stuff seriously. You guys have seen it with Hero coming into FD. You see it in all different forms of motorsport, but like sim driving is a huge way to get better. Our go-to Sim Gears, Sim Magic stuff, which is why we sell it on simhq.com. I would push you guys to go over and shop with us, but everything is selling out really quick. So I don't want to say go get your stuff from us because I don't even know how much stock we have on the website. You guys can check it out and let me know, but we have a lot of Black Friday deals going on, and I've been seeing stuff fly off the shelves. So I don't want to say we got everything in stock if we don't. I hope we do. Next question, we have a Toyota MR2 JDM. So it's got the Rev 3 3S GTE. He can't get the car over 15 PSI. Is it possible it's because the factory cat? He's got all the other supporting mods other than the factory cat. Best advice I can have. I apologize if you've already done this, and I'm not assuming that you're dumb or you didn't try this, but boost leak tester, that's like the number one thing. I talked about it briefly before, but if you guys are ever going to dyno tune your car, you should be doing two things, especially if you've like had the engine out. Water pressure test it to make sure you don't have coolant leaks once you build coolant pressure and the car gets hot. I've lost motors from coolant leaks. You can definitely do damage just from something that you would never see until the engine gets hot. And then especially if you run water, you don't know or see or smell that you're leaking coolant. And then boost leak test. You will waste your time, especially if you have an older MAF car, mass airflow sensor, tuning your car if you have a boost leak, because then when you fix it, the whole thing's going to run all wonky. So boost leak tester, you can Google it and learn how to build them. Maybe that's something I should make. I should make an LZ spec boost leak tester. That'd be a pretty cool product. But honestly, you guys can literally go to Home Depot and you can make one. You buy a PVC cap and then put like a bike valve in it, or you can put a tire valve in it just with like one with the like little nut, and then put a coupler on it where your intake would go. Make sure you have any like PCV lines blocked off or capped. Put 15 pounds in your system. Is it going to leak out? If it leaks out, then you found why you can't get the car over 15 PSI. Now, I don't think this is your issue. I'm not a big 3S GTE guy, but also be mindful of when you have crazy high back pressure or an intercooler restriction, that will also prevent you from being able to reach your boost. Even if you have a crazy wastegate, here's what can happen. Like, let's say you have an internal gate with a 20-pound spring. The way that works is that vacuum line tells your wastegate to open and make the turbo stop building boost when you hit 20 PSI. But if you have an intercooler restriction, what happens is you get maybe 20 PSI before the intercooler, but after the intercooler, the engine's only seeing 10 pounds. So it's possible that you have an intercooler restriction, and basically you're building up all this pressure on the hot side of your intercooler, which is then causing your wastegate to open so the turbo can't make more boost. But on your gauge, the engine's only seeing 10 pounds. Now, when you go to a properly sized intercooler, not only will you accomplish being able to run the boost that you actually want, but you'll actually make more power at the same boost because your turbo now isn't chopping hot air. Basically what happens when you start to have a restriction like that, your turbo is now, instead of just being able to breathe and push the air in, it's like fighting the air, the pressure and building up in there. So it starts to create heat and become like a hair dryer, and heat doesn't make power. So when you have an intercooler restriction, your intercooler also get hotter. Everything just gets mad. So I definitely recommend looking into boost leaks and maybe an intercooler restriction. I don't know the chassis or the platform enough to be able to comment if that's a thing, but it doesn't hurt. Ooh, next one, we got a new car, 2023 Toyota GR86 Premium. Wants to do a Tomei dual exit exhaust right now. He wants a track look. What upgrade modification do you recommend for the ultimate track look? I like this one. That's a good one. So obviously coilovers. And I said this before, the BCDS series is my favorite. The level below it is still good, I just think the streetability and trackability, like it's literally better in every way, shape, or form. And I think it's the best value for your dollar. It fucks up every other coilover in that category. It's not even a competition. So if you never tried DS series, give it a shot. I think your mind will be blown. We run them on absolutely every car, every build, even the pro comp cars. Coilovers are important, but getting the right wheel and tire package, I feel like, is key for the track look. Traditionally, I like to think most of my cars I run with the track look. It doesn't need to be a square sidewall, but I'll give you my rule of thumb for tires if I was going for a track look. If you have a 9-inch wheel, a 235 would be the minimum width I would go. That's going to have like still a little bit of a rounding to it. 10.5, the minimum that I would go would be probably a 275. 265 is going to start to have a little bit of stretch. The stretch is where it really ruins the look. I don't know what size wheels people run, but usually I'll run the smaller of the two options. Like let's say we're talking an S13. I wouldn't run 18s. I would run 17s if I wanted the track look. On an E46 M3, I wouldn't run 19s. I would run the 18s if I wanted the track look. But you want to get that like nice sidewall profile, a little bit of chunk to her, and then a little bit of camber. If it's a rear-wheel drive car, you'll run a little bit more camber in the front, and then in the back, like maybe like 1 or 2 degrees. Track cars will. I don't want to go down a camber rabbit hole. The grippier your tires and the stiffer your shocks, the more camber you want to run because the more the car will actually like sit on it. But if we're just talking for looks, you would probably want like a degree or 2 of camber, nice square, meaty tire profile. And then my rule of thumb is I don't like to have a gap above the tire. I don't like to be tucking tire. I like to just try to be flush. That's my ideal like track stance. You can absolutely be lower. You can be a little bit higher, but that's kind of my my rule of thumb. All right. We're almost at an hour. I've got quite a few more questions, a lot more questions, an incredible amount of questions. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get through, let's just say, I'll hang out with you guys for like another like 15, 20 minutes. I'll get through as many of these as I can. Hopefully some of your guys' questions are repeats. I'm going to probably try to do another live stream like this, maybe once or twice more in the next week or two. And I'll try to get through some more of these questions. I won't ask any more. That way I can hopefully get to some of your guys. But realistically speaking, in the matter of 20 minutes, I have 150 questions. And I've been a little bit too thorough with my answers. Look, I'd rather try to answer a dozen questions in my response to one question than just go super fast and not be thorough. As a reminder, part of the reason for doing this is not only to help you guys make sure that you have all the information to be able to make the right decisions for your build, but also selfishly, we do this thing where at Drift HQ, we can't give sales discounts. We can't announce all the discounts that we're going to do for Black Friday. And I know how annoying it is to be in your guys' shoes and not want to buy something to find out that it's going to go on sale the next day. So what we do is we say, hey, email us blackfriday@drifthq.com. And what we'll do is we'll guarantee you that we'll get you the best price, whether we can send you a quote immediately because we can't advertise the price, but we can actually give it to you. Or if we say, hey, wink, wink, we're going to send this quote in 5 days to make sure you get the best possible price, that's what we do. But the problem is when there's a bunch of setup questions woven into all these emails, it makes it incredibly laborious for our amazing sales team to respond and give you guys information that you need. So I'm trying to just answer and nerd out as much as I can. That way you guys have the confidence to be able to just say, hey, I got an SR. I want G25 660 because Adam said that's what to do versus asking the question and then having to type the reply that I already said in the video. So hopefully this helps you guys in that. And the next question that we have looks to be a very technical one from Corey with a 2003 BMW 330 Ci, fully built balance N54, dyno tuned by Derek. Hell yeah. Derek's the man, Burton tuned. 654 horsepower, 589 torque. That's healthy on ethanol precision, 6266. Journal bearing, twin gates, twin disc clutch. Damn, this is a car. But you've not been very happy with the turbo in the car. It's pretty laggy, pulls like a freight train up top, but has no hit down low. His K24 E36 has a G3660 and hits way harder. Two very different setups, but you'd love to switch to a G series and an E46. Car's got a custom manifold with a V-band inlet to the turbo top mount wood Garrett fit in its place and have better spool, even if it sacrificed a little top end. So let me read this. You got a V-band inlet to the turbo. Okay, so yeah. Now, this is an answer that I don't have exactly for you. I don't know that turbo specifically, but I do know there are certain precisions that do not share the exact same V-band inlet flange as Garrett's. However, there are adapters if that's the case. And it might be as simple as like a little ring that you insert before you do the clamp. That's a question I know our sales guys will know the answer to. I don't know that exact answer, but what I can tell you, precisions, I've always been told, make more power than Garrett's. Now, I believed that up until about a year and a half ago. I always went with Garrett because of the reliability. On a drift car, I would see people going through multiple precision turbos in a single season versus Garrett's. I will get multiple seasons out of the same turbo and then change it just because. They literally, I have not ever had a Garrett turbo fail except for one time when I lost a wastegate line and sent an SR turbo to 70 PSI and then said, peace. Now, I actually did a turbo testing video, not a video. I did turbo testing for myself. This is, I'm going to say this, Garrett probably will be upset with me because I'm a big Garrett guy. I was considering going to a precision because I wanted to make more power in my E36 for FD. I tested back-to-back with multiple different precisions, multiple different Garretts of similar trims and sizes. The Garrett made more power and spooled better everywhere. Even Freddie didn't think that was going to be the case. It was something that he really wanted to do so he could steer his tuning clients in the right direction. And the Garretts fucked the precision up. So basically, in a roundabout way, I think a Garrett is the best turbo, and I'm not just saying that because I'm sponsored. In fact, technically, I'm not Garrett sponsored this year. I just really believe in the Garrett turbo, and we purchase and sell a lot of them at Drift HQ. I run them on all my builds, and I do think it's the best option. I think a lot of the debate between Precision and Garrett was back when they were comparing to the GTX line and then comparing to Precision's next-gen line, which isn't apples to oranges. The G Series is sick. It's amazing. Highly recommend it. Now, the question that you need to know the answer to, you want to make, let's just say, a minimum of 654 horsepower, good torque, but you want to get that spool better. I think that you won't sacrifice any top end and you will gain low end if you went to a G35 900. That is going to be ridiculously quick spooling, like unbelievably snappy, and you can still make 750. Now, the important thing, because you have an M54, I think that's a 3-liter. I'm not sure, but on a 6-cylinder, especially the BMW engines, there's a lot of exhaust volume, especially in ethanol. You're probably going to want a 121 AR. People get scared that they're going to lose spool if they put too big of a hot side. But what usually happens, the rule of thumb is if you have a back pressure issue, which I would highly recommend putting a back pressure sensor in your collector, your tuner will love you. If you have high back pressure, your engine thinks that it's a smaller engine and it will start to make the power roll over. It will generate a bunch of heat. It will get mad. And that's when things just are very annoying. So as a rule of thumb, let's say you put the 8.3 AR on there, which I would not recommend. I'm going to use completely BS numbers so you don't hold me to it. Let's say you spooled at 1,000 RPM, which you won't. You would probably spool 200 to 300 RPMs later every step up in hot side, but you would pick up 100 to 150 horsepower if you have a crazy back pressure restriction. So I would recommend you do a 120 AR G35 900. Have Derek send me the dynograph because I think it's going to destroy that precision and you're going to be very, very happy. And if you aren't happy for whatever reason, you want to try a different AR, tell Derek to text me and I'll let you test some different ARs because I have lots of different ones because I love testing different setups, but obviously you only want to buy once, cry once. So yeah, hit me up. I'd be very curious to know, but I think the G35 900 would make you really stoked. It's a cool setup. All right, next question. We got a JZX. It's the steadiness to the world around me that has taken from me health problems. What does that mean? Okay. Well, if you have health problems, I'm sorry. That's a bummer. I'm not being sarcastic at all. Where can you find new parts like door seals, sunroofs, door cards for your Chaser? We need someone with access to resources in Japan. Why is all this part so expensive? Anyway, Hey, wish you know. All right. So my advice to you for finding your OE parts for your Chaser, a lot of times you can find them on eBay. There's a site that I have not personally used, but I know a lot of people use it for OE stuff. It's called Emiyama. I'm gonna Google it so I can. Emiyama, Japan. Amayama. Amayama. Johan has told me that before. Oh, look, Guitar Matt's a mod in here. That's pretty cool. Who let him do that? Oh, fun fact, Tommy's also a mod in here, and he likes to come in and create problems. It's a good thing he doesn't know this is going on because he just argues with me. He's like, oh, HKS turbos are the best. They're better. Guess what the new HKS turbos are? G-Series. Anyway, Emiyama, I've not personally used it, so if you have a bad experience, don't blame me. But I know a lot of people will buy parts for their Japanese cars and OEM stuff from there. All right. Now we got two S15s coming up next. I like that. Got a 2001 Nissan S15, first S15 waiting up from Japan. What would I recommend for conservative street car making around 400 wheel to start? And will we see you at Rockville Festival? I assume you mean playing. My band, our debut is actually going to be at E-Town, so I don't think we'll be making Rockville. There's just scheduling conflict. But 400 horsepower, if you're on pump gas, that's spicy. I wouldn't recommend it on a stock motor. You can definitely do it, but that's a little bit on the spicy side. Put it on an ethanol. And if you're on ethanol on a stock motor and want to make 400, you could do a G25 550 and have a like good solid mid-range. I would do drop-in head studs. Those S15 motors actually have factory metal head gaskets, which is cool. But I would still recommend doing head studs. If you wanted the smaller turbo, if you're running a bit bigger turbo, it makes the cylinder pressure less because you're moving the power band up, and you might be able to get away with not doing head studs at 400 horsepower. No warranty, but you could probably get away with a G25 660. The Artec manifold's a great combo, super easy to run lines and everything. G25 660, if you didn't want to do head studs, you might be able to get away with it. G25 550, if you were down to do head studs and want a little bit more meaty mid-range, but good fuel is super, super key. The SR bottom ends are actually unbelievably strong. What usually kills them is bad pump gas or a bad tune. They'll melt the piston. On ethanol, you're not going to do that. Next one, we got another S15 99 Spec R weekend track car. Want to do a nice conservative 350 to 450 horsepower. How crazy is it? I called it. When we were talking about this concept, I was like, I'm gonna get all these dudes with SRs asking me what turbos to run. But it's cool. I like being able to talk about this stuff because to figure it out on my own, I've had to try it. And just as a quick disclaimer, I've now had the SR in my green S15, which is a forged S15 SR. I've had the SR in my S13, which is a forged SR, but it doesn't have the VCT. And then I've had the stock SR in my Australia car, which had a G25 550. Both the US cars have G25 550s. And then I did a forged engine in my Australia car with a G25 660. So I've tried all of the different options. I have never done any of them on pump gas because I don't have a death wish for my engine. Actually, I did my OG S13 on pump gas back when I had like the old school Gen 1 GTX turbos. Yeah, I would not recommend that. Anyway, how do you prevent the SR20 from blowing up if you want to bang limiter? Dual guide shims, anything else? It's like SR people love to argue about this. The best thing that you could do, in my opinion, would be to put a mid-sized turbo on it. And here's the reason why. Your power is going to start to roll over. And what happens is you add enough grip to your car. I don't know if that's what you mean by track car, but assuming you do, in my drift cars, I just add grip until they can't hit rev limiter. The power rolls over and you just never hit limiter. So you're not banging or sitting off it, but you can still be foot to the floor. That's why if you listen to a lot of my driving footage, you won't hear me going while I'm drifting. It's usually like, and it just kind of hangs at peak torque. Remember we talked about how torque is the most important thing for drifting. Your motor is going to naturally sit at peak torque if you just add unlimited grip to it. So that would be my number one recommendation. The link limiter is really soft, and they have really good settings for SRs where a lot of the rocker arm issues and limiter issues that people used to have was when they would put like a BR rev limiter, ask me how I know, or just a super old school ECU with a crazy ignition cut bang bang limiter. If you have a soft limiter that like kind of will naturally make the power roll over, it's going to accomplish a similar thing to what I'm saying with grip. But you can probably get away without doing the dual valve shim situation and not throw a rocker arm as long as you don't have an aggressive limiter. I have put rocker arm stoppers in my motors and they've saved me from doing more damage. I've also had people say that they've caused more damage because it wedges the rocker arm instead of letting it fly somewhere else. So I don't know. You can do what you want there, but honestly, I would say just leave that thing stock. Don't go too crazy. If you want to put cams in, you can put cams in. If you want to do head studs, you can do head studs. But ethanol is going to be your best friend. And then depending on where you want your power band, if you want a little bit more up top and a little bit higher number, run the G25 660. If you want a little bit less down low, or if you want a little bit less up top, a little more down low, mid range, run the G25 550. Artec manifold's what you want. And if you, for whatever reason, want to run pump gas and you just think that you want to live life on the edge and you want to make a lot of power in pump gas, I would go up in frame to a G30 turbo, like a G30 660 or even a G30 770, which would be the equivalent, if you know old school Garrett stuff, of like a 3076. It's going to be big, it's going to be laggy, but it'll be a lot safer because you will make more power per pound of boost. Yes, you will be pushing your power band up higher, but then there's less chance of detonation or hurting your engine. Yep. All right, later. Thank you. Next question. Ooh, this is a good one. We don't sell a lot of parts for these, but your life is probably miserable because I've had the same car and I know how it be. We've got a 2009 BMW 335i plagued by the N54. Oh, he's got a YouTube channel built in the rain, probably documenting all the woes of your life owning an N54. 800 horsepower, spline crank hub, port injection, single turbo, 6466. Dan, you got some money in this thing. M3 body conversion, HPFP. I don't even know what a lot of this. Dan, he's got a Ford LSD. This thing must go fast. You got a fire extinguisher mounted. Wow. Any other upgrades besides the M3 rear quarter panels? We're on the Turbo Talk, right? And I'm pushing everybody towards Garrett. Garrett did not sponsor this video. I wish they did. I could use some more turbos. It's taking all of them off our dang shelf over at Drift HQ. If you want to make more power, you know what? You precision people, you don't like running water lines. That's the reason why a lot of people run precision instead of Garrett's, because they're too lazy to run water lines. If you have a water-cooled precision, though, I'd say just switch to a Garrett. You'll pick up spool and probably some power up top. On my 335, I did all the M3. You already said you did M3 suspension all around. Dang, that's a really, really cool car. What have I done to my car? A seat was great in my car. What else did I do to my 335 that made me happy? Bigger brakes made me happy. Stopping's good, so you don't crash. That's good. But yeah, if you wanted to try a Garrett setup, go ahead. It's funny, Matt's in the comments. It's not Stinky Pete's, it's Sneaky Pete's, Matt. Gosh. All right. We have Dr. Danny with I feel like you were just flexing on me with your 335 with your parts list, because it sounds a whole lot better than mine, if I'm being honest. But mine's getting rebuilt right now. But that's a cool car. Maybe we could race later or something. 328i M3 fun weekend car, pushing to its limit. Take it autocross for now, just back roads. What's the best sway bar option? Go big or go small? There's a big range of options just for the front when they come in the kit. So blah, blah. All right, I'm gonna nerd out on sway bars for a little bit. A great example of this is my 964. My 964, I think, is way undersprung. It is so soft that when I slam on the brakes, the front dips down a bunch. When I step on the gas, the thing does a wheelie. It's cool because it's cushy around town, but it would have sucked to take that into the Smoky Mountains because of how much body roll it has. So I put the literal stiffest sway bars I could possibly do on that thing. So that way it could be soft and cushy and compliant, but then it could also have the grip for the corners without rolling and rubbing through my fenders. Now, there's definitely a happy medium with this, and I feel like a big determining factor of what sway bars to run comes with your spring rates that you have on the car, because sway bars are essentially just amplifying your spring rates. If you already have super high spring rates, you don't want super stiff sway bars. Your car's going to ride like it's on rails, which also then goes down the rabbit hole of what tires are you running. It's really important for like your suspension, your sway bars, and your tires all to be in the same range. It's kind of like when you have an engine, you want your turbo size to work well with your cam size. With your suspension, you want your spring rates to work well with your sway bars, to work well with your tires. So if you have a loose street tire, you'll probably want softer sway bars and softer springs. As you get into slicks, you're going to need a gnarly sway bar. Depending on your brakes, will depend on how much spring rate you want for the dive, and depending on your power, will debate how much spring rate you want in the rear. Because obviously, if you make a bunch of power and you got crazy grip, you're going to be doing wheelies everywhere, and it's not going to behave how you want. I know it's not an exact great option. The best thing that you can do would be to say, get an adjustable sway bar. The stock bars are what I run on drift cars usually. Sometimes I'll go a little bit stiffer in the front. My go-to for drift cars, honestly, is no rear sway bar and a super stiff front sway bar, just because I like to transfer as much from the front to the rear as possible, and I don't care about my front having any grip. In fact, I hate it. If I could get rid of my front tires altogether, I would. I like to drive completely off the rear of the car, and I like to think that that makes you more competitive, just because you're usually on the gas when the other guy isn't, because he doesn't have to be, but you have to be, because all your grip is in the rear, and if you lift, then you push and crash. I learned that from Chelsea, and it's made me drive good. Anyway, that would be my suggestion. I know it's not an exact clear answer, but I kind of need more info to be able to answer that super good. 1972 Datsun 620 stock truck, saving money for the build. Been dreaming the build for a while. Let me read through. There's a lot of info here. Is there any possibility you guys know someone has time to do garage build? I don't know where you're located, so that's probably a big thing. But if I had a Datsun 620 and I wanted someone to build it, I honestly don't know who I would take it to. Feel free if you guys have any suggestions in the comments. That's kind of a weird one that's outside of my scope of knowledge. If you have like a Skyline GTR or like any sort of Skyline, I'm going to recommend you take it to Tommy, because I know he knows his way around a Skyline, especially in the restoration world, better than pretty much anyone else I've ever met. If you have a Nissan drift car and you're located in Florida, I'll tell you to take a Monster Performance. If you're in California and you're building a BMW, I would say take it to Castro. He does really cool like E30 and like S54 and E36 M3 swaps and those things. That's probably the extent of my knowledge in the realm of what we're talking about. If you have a BMW and you're looking to do a build in the Central Florida area, you got PSI out here. What other shops do I know that I could recommend? You know who's Gangster, who does really good work and is also in Connecticut? If you have a track car, or if you have even a drift car, it's funny, I'm going to say this, it's going to sound really pretentious. If you ask what the price is going to be, he won't respond. He pretty much only does blank check builds because of the level of quality that he wants to keep stuff at. But my buddy Seamus, you spell his name like Seamus, his shop is Tailored Chassis Solutions. That dude knows his way around cars. So that's another one that I'd recommend. And I apologize if I'm forgetting some of my other friends that build cars. But those are some of my recommended go-to shops if you guys are looking to have some stuff built. I wish that we could build stuff for people, but we can barely keep my fleet of cars running, let alone take on builds for other people. I'm going to do one more question, and then from here, I'm going to save this form, and I will try to do another live stream and answer some questions for you guys. Next question is from Cody Jackson. We got a 98 Nissan Skyline R34, pretty stock RB25 Neo with 170,000 kilometers on it. Replace the transmission, clutch, timing belt, water pump, cast. Is there anything else I should be looking out for my car for shopping for turbos as well as ECU? What ECU to run with a reputable tuner in Orlando? I think Freddie is arguably one of the best tuners in the world. Hit up Spec Tuned. He will take care of you. He will also help make sure that you pick all the right sensors. We work with him at Drift HQ, so we can also sell you and get you all the right stuff for your link. Link is what he will probably recommend for you to do on that thing. We've done a bunch. I can also help you figure out whatever turbo you want, but you weren't asking what turbo or ECU or all that stuff to buy. You're asking what to do to your car before you throw the turbo on it. Obviously, you're going to need a clutch if you haven't already done one, if you want to turn the power up. In terms of maintenance, when vacuum lines get old and things get heat cycled a lot, water things like coolant hoses, any of that stuff that looks dry rotted, I'd recommend replacing. Putting a good radiator in your car never hurts. Koyo's kind of our go-to. What else on a Neo? We've done quite a few of them. Gaskets, which it sounds like you've already got pretty well covered. Yeah, and then when you do and you go through to do the ECU, we do a lot with wiring specialty. That's a great thing to get rid of a lot of the old crusty connectors and things that can fail on your wiring harness. The biggest thing is just making sure that all your stuff is I don't know if this is a job you're looking to do yourself. I know I literally just said it, but Lee over at Monster Performance, highly recommend him if you need work done on it. He's worked his way around it, and he's also someone that could tune the car for you too. Lee's a great tuner. I think he prefers, I'm not sure what ECU he prefers. Anyway, Lee could definitely take care of it for you, or Freddie could tune it if you want to build it yourself, and we can help you make sure you get the right stuff for it. But Neos are great engines. You don't really need to do a lot, and you can make a decent amount of power stock. The age-old debate is whether you want to do an oil pump gear or not. Some people say do it, some people say don't. You got a car with 170,000 kilometers on it. I guess that's only like 100,000 miles, but RBs, your biggest issue you're going to have is oil issues. So if you're down, I would say just do a new N1 oil pump. If you don't want to do a boundary gear in it, people swear that the stock pump is good enough, but that wouldn't be a bad idea to do. And I guess just to sum this up, if you guys are watching this now, or if you want to go back and watch this later, basically what this was an attempt to try to answer one question for one person that hopefully applies to a lot of you guys. It's cool to see, just strolling through this form, so many E36s, E46s, 350Zs, a lot of the cars that we feature on the channel, which of course I'm familiar with because of that. Obviously a lot of the questions are the same. What turbo should I run? What fuel should I run? And rather than having our sales guys at Drift HQ answer those questions a bajillion times, I'll be straight up with you guys. We do probably the same amount during the Black Friday season of sales as we do in like an entire quarter. So the volume of emails incoming is crazy high. I sat down with the sales team and we brainstormed, what can we do to cut down and be as efficient as possible? Because if I'm sending you guys to our Black Friday at drifthq.com email to get the best price possible and get your orders locked in, how can I get it to the point where you guys know exactly what you want and it doesn't take 30 questions going back and forth asking about your setups? So hopefully I've been able to answer some of your questions. If your question hasn't been answered, I would recommend you reach out Black Friday at drifthq.com with as much information as possible. We're talking like chassis, engine, fuel, whatever question you have. And the big thing is, we can't tell you all the sales that are going to happen right away, but we know all of the sales that are going to happen. We're just not allowed to disclose them until the day that they're supposed to go live. So what we can do is either send you a quote back immediately if we're allowed to give you the sale under the table, or if we'll get in trouble for that, we'll tell you, hey, hang tight. On this day, we're going to send your quote back and you'll get the best price possible. So I know what it's like to be a consumer and to buy something just to have it go on sale the next day, and it's incredibly frustrating. So I'm hoping to eliminate that, get you guys set up with the best parts for your build so you can be happy, have the best possible engine that can be reliable, make good sounds, and be fun to drive. If you enjoyed this, let me know. If you absolutely hated it, I will not set aside another hour to do it again. But judging by the amount of questions I have left in this form, I will likely be doing this again a couple times. I really enjoy it. I like nerding out about this stuff. And it's just fun for me to talk about. I definitely don't know everything about everything, but I've messed around with so many different setups and nerded out over so many different dyno graphs that I like to think I know enough now where I can confidently speak and guide you guys in the right direction. And hopefully your tuner, your builder, and your girlfriend, wife, sister, brother, whoever's in your car will thank me when you get to dinner in one piece and you have a car that's reliable, fun for many years to come. So thank you guys, and I will see you soon.